Hello, welcome to WCC Wednesday. Today we are talking about refugee resettlement, something that's been on the news, and we've been sharing information at the council about refugees from Afghanistan, Wisconsin, and we've had lots and lots of questions and interests. So today I'm joined by Sarah from Lutheran Social Services to talk a little bit about the process and talk about how this all works. Sarah, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'd be happy to, and thank you so much for hosting this. We're delighted to see you all virtually this way. I'm Sarah Halstead. I'm the Church Relations Liaison with Lutheran Social Services of Wisconsin and Upper Michigan. And we want to be able to share with you the basics today about refugee resettlement, but also answer some questions about what's happening with this whole Afghanistan crisis and how can I help? And we'll spend a little time, if you have questions, answering those as well. But I'm just going to share my screen here for a moment, and then we will jump into that presentation. So give me 1 second. Here we go. Thank you for your patience. Oh, gotta wait for the little bar to move out of the way. Technology is both a blessing and a curse sometimes, but we're really happy that we have the ability to do this. So again, we're going to share with you today the ABCs of refugee resettlement. And by the ABCs, what I mean is awareness, belonging, and community. And I want you to know a little bit of a disclaimer here. What we will share with you today is current. As of today, as of October 20th, 2021, we want to always share with you the most current information, but we know that this is an evolving situation and there could be some things that are different tomorrow or next week. So we would encourage you to continue to connect with us and find out what's happening. But today we're going to talk about the ABCs, and then we're going to have that little bonus Q&A. So a time to answer your questions as well. As I mentioned, we're here representing Lutheran Social Services. Maybe you've heard from our president and CEO, Hector Colon. And of course, I'm delighted to be here with you. And I want to acknowledge Mary Flynn, who is our Refugee Resettlement Program Manager. Literally everything I'm going to share with you today, I have learned from Mary in the last few months. And she's a tremendous resource for you and for all of us. And our mission at Lutheran Social Services is to act compassionately, serve humbly, and lead courageously. And this program really exemplifies that. So as we get into the ABCs, A stands for awareness. And by learning more about refugee resettlement and sharing that knowledge with others, we're all better equipped to be able to share our love and support as a community in very effective ways. It also helps us to stop the spread of misinformation and stigma. And I think one of the best ways to learn is really to ask questions. So let's get started with a few of those. So what exactly are refugees? Well, sometimes people get terms like refugees and asylees and immigrants confused. And this can really feed into bad feelings about groups of people because they're misunderstood. Now, add to that confusion that the rest of the world uses the term refugee a little differently than we do in the United States. So let's try to learn together. Refugees are distinctly different from asylees and from immigrants. And these differences can be summarized into a 1, 2, 3 generalization. So one, immigrants. Immigrants voluntarily leave their homeland and then they legally resettle in another country. Sometimes we hear about illegal immigrants, but immigrants truly do this legally. Then there's two, asylees. They leave their homeland and they request some protection and a safe haven in a second country. And then we come to refugees. And refugees are driven from their homeland while they're fleeing violence or war. They seek some safety in a second country, and then later they are resettled into a third country. Now, remember I said that the rest of the world uses that term refugee a little bit differently? In the United States, a refugee is someone who has already been admitted to the US after passing multiple screenings, including health and security checks. In the rest of the world, that term refugee means someone who is seeking refuge. Now, we call those asylees or asylum seekers. In the United States, a refugee is someone who has received refuge. And just a note, the Lutheran Social Services Refugee Resettlement Program serves both asylees and refugees. So what is refugee resettlement? Well, refugee resettlement is a humanitarian effort between the United States and the United Nations. After World War II, the United Nations started to define what refugees are. And at that time, the US began to make a commitment to take refugees every year. So, how does LSS fit into this? Well, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked. Traditionally, refugees flee their country and make their way to a United Nations refugee camp or refugee center in another country that is safe. And this is a picture of one such camp in Kenya. And incidentally, the word Kakuma does not represent a city. It's actually a word that means nowhere. That might sort of describe how a person may feel when they're in a refugee camp. Now, once they're there, the United Nations conducts interviews to determine eligibility for refugee status and protection. And if they are given refugee status, then a case can be selected for resettlement in a third country. The International Organization for Migration, or IOM, which is a part of the United Nations system, decides which cases go where, and then they help to coordinate travel to the final destination countries. Now, refugees don't always have a choice as to where they resettle. The choice that they have is either to stay in an unsafe or uncertain place or to go when they're given that opportunity. Now, if they are assigned to the United States, then they go through a process to be cleared by us before arrival. The US Department of State, Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, otherwise known as PRM, works in partnership with 9 voluntary national resettlement agencies. And Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, or LIRS, is one of those 9. And Lutheran Social Services is an affiliate of LIRS. We're a local resettlement agency. Now, resettlement agencies' jobs start at the airport when the refugees arrive. We don't go out and try to find refugees. And typically this process before the refugee comes to us takes about 18 to 36 months. Now, it is really important to know that when refugees arrive, they have permanent, legal, documented status. So they can rent an apartment, they can get a bus pass, they can sign their kids up for school, get a job, etc. They are eligible for benefits and services that any resident of Wisconsin would be eligible for, except for voting privileges. That is something they get after passing their citizenship test, which has to be done within 5 years. So the goal of resettlement is self-sufficiency. Refugees are expected to become self-sufficient and not be dependent on agencies or churches or communities. And by self-sufficient, we mean that they are working, they're paying their own expenses, they're learning English, they're obeying all the laws and guidelines expected of any resident in Wisconsin and the United States. So LSS Refugee Resettlement provides a number of different things. First, there are the core services, which they get in the first 30 to 90 days. And this would include an intensive welcome, community integration, and a number of connections to resources. And then for the first year, we have case management. This could go longer if there's a special case or a complex case. But we also provide ongoing information and referral for up to 5 years from the time that they arrive here in the United States. Of course, we've got connection to employment programs so that they can become self-sufficient as quickly as possible. And there's cultural orientation, enrollment in ESL classes. If they don't speak English, they can learn English as a second language. We also have appointments where they can walk in and get the help that they need without, and some time without appointments that they can stop in. And of course, if there's emergencies that come up, we're there to help with that as well. Now, here is a great example of how one refugee is using his God-given gifts to serve. This is Omar, and Omar actually came from Kakuma camp, which we had in the picture earlier, after fleeing a dangerous situation in Somalia. He is now a program supervisor with Lutheran Social Services and is a great example of how someone is contributing and a great success story for this kind of program. Now, the current situation in Afghanistan presents us with some very immediate and urgent needs. Due to the evacuation of so many individuals so quickly, there is a mix of situations. Some of the Afghans are refugees who were already in the process of coming here. And some of those are individuals who worked for the US in the past 20 years, such as assisting with our own military, but now they were facing persecution in Afghanistan. Normally, getting them home would have taken up to about 18 months, but in this case, it happened in just weeks. Some of the people are not what we would term refugees by definition, but rather those who are seeking asylum. And generally, they would not have qualified for the benefits described earlier. So Lutheran Social Services had been preparing for their greater needs. Many of these folks do not speak English. As soon as they receive employment authorization cards, the LSS refugee resettlement staff will work closely with them to find permanent and stable employment. However, it may take considerable time before they're authorized to work in the US and have the skills needed for employment. Now, normally LSS receives pass-through funding from our National Resettlement Affiliate, LIRS, in the amount of $1,275 for each case. And those dollars must be spent on behalf of the client for shelter and safety needs. So covering things like housing and food and winter clothing, car seats, utilities, phones, etc. However, at first it seemed that Afghans not technically defined as refugees would not have this funding provided, and it would need to be secured from private donations. Now, due to some strong advocacy, legislation was recently introduced on a national level to change this, and we are blessed to announce that as of just a couple of weeks ago, this was approved. So Afghans will now be eligible for benefits such as W-2 for families with kids, or food share, or Badger Care, and refugee cash assistance for up to 8 months. However, because we do know that it will take longer for many of these Afghans to become employed, it will also take many more months than usual to provide the kind of support that they need. Well, now that we've covered a lot of ground with A for awareness, let's move on to B of the ABCs. And B is for belonging. Part of what makes LSS's resettlement program so successful is how we create a sense of belonging for each new refugee who arrives. And we don't have to look any further than Luke chapter 10 to learn about our calling to care for others in the parable of the Good Samaritan. As Christians, we want to help. And I can tell you that over the past several weeks, we have had an outpouring of support from all different faith groups. And our goal is to resettle refugees into their permanent home as quickly as possible, which is really a little different than being a temporary guest in someone else's home. Typically, as I said, refugees are picked up from the airport and then taken to their own apartment that has all the basics to get them started. Everything from toiletries to kitchen items, linens, cleaning supplies, furniture, and some culturally appropriate food. Now, the collection of such supplies is a wonderful way to help people feel welcome and that they belong. Volunteers for the refugee program create a sense of belonging in so many ways. They can do things like serve as a cultural mentor to help acclimate to life in the US, or provide transportation for a refugee until they can obtain their own. Maybe help prepare the home before the arrival, or assist with grocery shopping for the new family. They could be a part of the welcoming group at the airport when they arrive, or maybe organize a collection of needed items and deliver those things to the refugee's new home. And these are just a few examples. There are many, many more. Some of these volunteer roles require background checks and training and a specific time commitment, but others do not. And some might require local proximity to the Milwaukee area, but many others can be done from a distance. Now, a special way to help create a sense of belonging is to be a co-sponsor for a refugee family. Working together with the support of the LSS Refugee Resettlement Team, co-sponsors can help with everything from furnishing apartments, checking in daily to make sure that all the needs are met, and, well, just being a good neighbor. Full co-sponsorship includes providing financial support to help cover the shelter and basic needs until self-sufficiency is achieved. And of course, the last part of ABCs is C, which stands for community. And this builds on awareness and belonging. The same way that we support families who are making their new homes in the US, we also strive to build community in this support system as well. We're going to learn from one another. What works well for one congregation may benefit another. And a challenge that is overcome by one family can help others. And we know that partnership models that truly work will create a stronger sense of community overall. Christ tells us that we're many parts of one body, and we need the diverse experiences and perspectives to allow us all to grow in love. And by recognizing the infinite worth in each part, including the new refugees and asylees, we will certainly experience people using their God-given gifts to serve. So now that we've covered the ABCs of refugee resettlement, I want to open it up for some questions and answers. I'm going to stop sharing here and we will see if there's some questions out there that we can help answer for you.
Yeah, I've got a couple. And I'm just going to say, if you're watching this later and you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat anyways, and I can reach out to Sarah or whoever and get them answered later on. But one thing I was wondering is, could you talk about how many people will be coming to be settled in Wisconsin? I know there's about 13,000 people at Fort McCoy, but they're not all coming to be permanently resettled in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
How many are going to stay?
That is a great question. And part of the reason that everyone is talking about this in Wisconsin is we're hearing about Fort McCoy. Fort McCoy is the largest processing center right now for the folks from Afghanistan, and it's bigger than the next 3 combined. So it's really huge. Not all of those people are going to end up in Wisconsin. I think the first case that we got actually didn't come from Fort McCoy. They're resettled in the places that can give them the best opportunity to become self-sufficient as quickly as possible. Some may have some connections in various communities, but we're all hearing about that and we're grateful for it because it's helped to raise awareness. Let me back up just a little bit, because back in the summer, we already knew that we were going to see a big increase in the refugee resettlement because there was a change in administration in Washington. And to give you an example, LSS served just a little over 100 at the end of 2020, but 4 years prior to that, we were serving about 300 cases a year. So we already knew that we were going to see a big increase with the changes as far as how many refugees were being accepted. And then we had the Afghan crisis and all the Afghans came. And so LIRS, that affiliate or that partner of ours, reached out and said, how many more cases could you take? And at that time, we estimated that, in addition to adding another 200, we could probably do about another 100. And then when we learned about some of the changes with the benefits that may be available, we thought maybe we could stretch this further for those that will be eligible for some of those benefits. And we said maybe another 100 on top of that. Now, all of those numbers are dependent upon the support and the resources that we're able to gather from people around the area. When we have more support, more funding, we can, of course, help more refugees. And we know that there's a huge need. We hear about that through Fort McCoy and everywhere else. So no matter whether you were actually fleeing Afghanistan or whether you were fleeing another country where you were being persecuted and having just as dangerous of a situation, you are worthy of that opportunity. So we know that there's going to be a significant number of Afghans. There's also going to be an increase in just refugees coming from around the world. So this is an incredibly important ministry and service in our area.
I think it's super important how you talk about, like, you can take more, the more resources you have, the more people you can help. And so
we would love to help more. And really we need what, anyone would need in our situation. We need to have funding. We need to have co-sponsors. We need to have volunteers. We need to have all those supplies ready to have them in their homes. And so the more support we can gather, the more we can help.
So you named off the ways that people can help. And so is this just in the Milwaukee area or is this beyond?
Yeah, actually
LSS
anywhere.
is in Milwaukee, but
yes. So our refugee resettlement program is based in Milwaukee, and there is a requirement that we serve or that we resettle refugees within a 100-mile radius of the resettlement agency. But there are some other agencies across Wisconsin as well. I know Jewish Social Services is in Madison. There's one in the Fox Valley. There's one in Wausau. There's a few other resettlement agencies. And so we work really well with those partners too. And we want to make sure that they're able to serve within their area. Sometimes there can be an exception, and we can ask LIRS if we could resettle a group of folks in another area. But to do that, we need to make sure that all the right pieces are in place. Is there a good job market? Is there housing that's affordable there? Can we see if we can get a few families or a few cases together? Because hey, we all like to be able to talk to somebody who speaks our own language, understands our culture, and the same is true of refugees. So we want to present that kind of community in an area for them too. So there's a couple of exceptions, but generally speaking, we try to resettle within 100 miles. Volunteers can help in so many ways. You and I were chatting earlier today, and one of the things that we try to equip each one of these families and individuals with is some kind of a tablet so that they can connect, just like we have today, to social media and with one another. Maybe you're a person that understands or has worked with tutoring ESL. You can do that online, like we're meeting each other here today. And there are certainly services that maybe somebody has a special skill, like they have a background in legal work and they could provide some assistance that way. Those can be done from a distance. But congregations and groups have very often collected a lot of items and then brought them to Milwaukee or had them shipped to Milwaukee. Sometimes it's gift cards. They go really easily in an envelope and off they go. But all of those things are so helpful and valuable in creating that sense of community and getting ready for their arrival.
Awesome. And so I will drop in the chat a link to LSS's website that kind of has fax has some of this information, has ways to reach out for anyone who wants to help.
Yeah, so if you go to if you go to lsswis.org, it will take you right to the page that has all the refugee information, and there's a frequently asked questions page. There's contact information. You can reach out to me at church.relations@lsswis.org. We will answer your questions and get you connected to the right groups or information. We're just delighted to be able to work together with you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for all your knowledge and for all your resources and all you are doing to welcome people.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to chat. It's good to see you all.